Today we're going to be taking a look at the P12 Slim edition here on Computer Tech and More, and we're going to be comparing it against the other slimline fans as well as other fans I've tested. Let's get right into the graphs and the data. First up is the case simulation test. This can be looked at in a couple key different ways, but first and foremost, the most important for you, the viewer, is what size computer case do you actually plan on buying? The 6-inch mark right here is representative of small form factor that are still a front-to-back airflow type design, not the ultra-compact like the Factor Design Terra or other like Dan cases that suck in air from the sides and blow it out the top. I'm talking a front-to-back airflow ITX type motherboard and or a short throw distance where you're putting the fans at the bottom of your case and you're blowing the air directly up into your GPU. That would also be very representative of that 6-inch mark. Then we're taking a look at the 9-inch mark. The 9-inch mark is represented by compact towers. Think something that can hold a standard ATX motherboard and GPU of the length of that motherboard, but basically no extra room. Again, front to back airflow. I think of the Dell Optiplex old computer, like business computers, for that mark. Then we have the 11-inch mark. That's for a mid-tower case. Think Meshify 2C, Corsair 5000 series, Corsair Obsidian 500 series, something like that would be the 11-inch mark. Then we have the 14.5-inch mark, which is represented by large towers, something like the Frac Design Torrent or other big, truly big towers would be that distance. Now, this distance isn't the length of the computer case. It is the distance from the back of the front fans to the rough position of the CPU socket. Again, this is assuming an air cooler. Now, quality of airflow does matter if you're going to be using an air-cooled GPU. We want to make sure that enough airflow is getting to that GPU position. So in that type of scenario, you still want to make sure you've got high-quality fans for high airspeed. So we'll be taking a look at the CPU air cooler testing in a little bit. Now, the other way that this data is important is it shows how quickly the air spreads out for a computer fan. So how good is that concentrating airflow? And in my opinion is you want all your fans to be good concentrating airflow as possible, because that helps drive the air from the front of the case to the back of the case. And you always want to make sure that you've got a good high airflow exhaust fan as well to draw that air back out of it. It doesn't do you much good if the air just gets trapped at the back of the case. So now onto the actual testing work compared against other fans. So we've got noise normalized results in the computer case. Again, it's got the 6, the 9, the 11, and the 14.5-inch mark against my control fan primarily. The control fan is based 3 parts A12X25 to 1 part A14. Noctua fans, 120mm class fans tend to do better at the 6 and 9-inch mark, while 140mm class fans tend to do better at the 11 and 14.5-inch mark. So by blending the fans together, I hope to create a good overall composite fan to compare everybody else against. So right here we have the graphs comparing the P12 Slim, the main focus of this video, versus the other 2 slimline fans I've tested so far. And I wanted to really zoom in on the slimline fans for the next couple graphs so that they're easier to directly compare. And we can see that the Slim, or I should need to say P12 Slim, is doing really quite well overall, except for at a bigger case size, where the A12X15 is slightly better, but all of them are a little bit on the low side in terms of performance in case airflow applications, which honestly kind of makes sense because these slimline fans are basically there to shove into a case where otherwise a normal fan wouldn't fit, so that you get at least some airflow going into your computer case where you normally wouldn't be able to fit a fan. So in those cases, you actually look for more types of pressure scenarios, which again, you can use the data from the CPU air cooler, because blowing air through a cooler is a pressure type scenario, just like blowing it into a compact tower. So this test really isn't completely fair on it, but well, it's still a perfectly valid test, at least in my opinion. At 100% PWM fan signaling, you see that things level out quite a bit better. They really jump up in performance and are very close, or relatively close, behind my control fan overall. But you'll notice that the P12 Slim is behind the pack. The A12X15 is leading it. Then we have overall the Kaze Flex 2, followed closely by the P12 Slim. But how do they compare against, well, everything else. So this yellow line is the Wonder Snail. I consider the Wonder Snail the bottom end of what I call a good fan, mainly for its 14.5 inch mark, but it gives a good kind of baseline. But I wouldn't buy a fan any lower in performance in any of the distance categories. So that's the 6, the 9, the 11, or the 14.5 inch mark. If you're picking a fan that's lower performance than it, you should just get something else. It's already kind of at the low end. So what are we seeing? Well, the P12 Slim, which is the orange line here, at the 6 and the 9 inch mark is actually doing pretty okay. But then by 11 and 14.5 inches, it's dropped back quite a bit. We have the A12X15, this blue line. The Storm is this other blue line. They may look similar. That's why I'm tracing it out. And do I have the Cosiflex listed on there? No, I don't. And this grouping of fans at the top is, I have standard fans that I just listed in every single one of my videos, and this grouping is one of them. And these are fans that I just consider to be truly good. As we crank things up to 100% PW fan signaling, here is the P12 Slim. It is at the bottom end of that grouping, so I consider it a underperforming fan, and really, once again, not a case airflow fan. Next, we're doing the noise testing. The 9 inch mark. The 9 inch mark was chosen because most fans that tended to spew air off to the sides dropped pretty steeply from the 6 to the 9 inch mark. So the 9 inch mark really started to separate the concentrated airflows from the non-concentrated airflows. And I wanted the majority of fans doing it in the testing to be over that 0.5 meter per second, which is just a little bit over the minimum that my anemometer can pick up. So I want to briefly touch on it. I am looking for help to boost this channel up. So subscribing, if you would consider joining me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube member, all that funding goes directly into this channel to buy better anemometer, better microphone, to build a little test chamber, and of course purchasing, well, all of these fans to test. So I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end of this video, but I just wanted to comment on that real quick, just because there are some limitations here. So the P12 Slim sort of starts off kind of okay, and then it flatlines pretty heavily, so it is shifted well towards the bottom, where it's not particularly noise efficient. This reddish pink line is the A12X15. You'll notice that it's actually worse at lower RPMs than the P12 Slim, but as RPM increases, it stays silent longer, or more silent. So you do have to decide what's kind of the most important here in this category to you. And then right here, this very light teal line, I am tracing it out because the Masterfan SF120M is a similar color, is the Cosiflex Slim. So it has a very similar scenario to the A12X15, and then it becomes more like the P12 Slim. So its noise profile actually gets better as RPM increases from 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%, and then it flatlines closer to 80, 90, and 100%. So it has an optimal range of its usage. Next, we're taking a look at performance through my CPU air cooler. My cooler is the Noctua U12A. It's got a fairly tight fin stack, so it's kind of this middle ground between a AAO or radiator in a custom loop and standard older fashioned lower fin density air coolers, or at least in my thought process. So on the left graph here, we have airspeed versus RPM. It's basically a blade efficiency graph. So it just shows us how good this particular blade design is at shoving air through the air cooler. And the P12 Slim is lining up very closely with my control fan overall, while the A12X15 is outperforming my control fan at higher RPMs, while the Cosiflex 2 is underperforming at most of its RPM range. Now, in terms of noise performance, this is the right graph. This is airspeed versus decibel reading, and every 10 decibels is a doubling in noise volume. So just because a line looks linear doesn't mean it is linear, because it is a doubled noise value. So right here we have the control line, and the P12 Slim is actually matching it 20, 30, 40, 50%, and then it kind of deviates, and then it kind of catches up again at higher RPMs. The A12X15 starts off worse, and as RPMs increase, it gets closer and closer and closer until it finally meets it at 100%. But then again, your fans are a little bit on the noisy side at that point. The Kaze Flex is sitting right there. It never really quite catches up. So how does the fan rank overall? Well, I call that pretty much middle of the pack. Amazingly, it lines up very closely to the Tough Fan 12 noise normalized results, 1.1 meters per second of air. So the way you could use this data is if you have a fan on the lower end and you're looking to improve performance through your current cooler, well, just look up the graph to a better fan that pushes more air, and you would see an improvement in either temperatures or wattage that your CPU can draw, or you could take that extra overhead airspeed and drop your PWM fan signal a little bit, and now your system would run quieter for the exact same thermal load, basically, or power draw. So that's how you could use it. So the P12 Slim is actually in a pretty okay position, where it's actually outperformed where'd the X15 go? Right here. The X15 is right down there at 0.8. And the Kaze Flex 2 is Slim, is right at the bottom. As we crank things up to 100% PWM fan signal, right here is the P12 Slim. Here's the A12X25, so it's really right behind it. And it's not that noisy either. It's only 1 decibel noisier. That is a very good result. Mind, in my own testing and from a read online, Arctic does have a lower consistency between one fan and the next, meaning the overall noise quality, not the airspeed that the fan can produce. I'm talking noise quality only in their fans. So I may have ended up with a golden sample. I may have ended up with a middle sample. I certainly don't think it's a lemon based on its noise value. So that is a great result. As a matter of fact, interestingly, it's outperformed the P12, which is right behind it. And but the P12 is also a bit quieter for approximately the same airspeed. So that's interesting. And then we have the A12X15 sitting just below it, but the A12X15 is slightly quieter. And then we have the Kaze Flex Slim, which is slightly noisier for also slightly less performance. So the P12 Slim is actually doing pretty darn well, in my opinion. So if you need to cool your system in a compact scenario, it's looking pretty good. But if you've got room for a bigger fan, obviously you do get other extra performance by, moving up the graph, basically. And in terms of its noise value, this is greatly simplified with a couple extra added on fans to it. Here's the P12 Slim. So it actually starts off really well, and then it kind of drops back and then gains a little bit and drops back. So I think there's a harmonic somewhere over here where just it hits a resonant frequency. That's what I'm calling harmonics. And it just kind of detracts from its performance overall. But it's doing pretty well. It's really impressive, actually. Next, we have CFM testing. First, I want to talk about it. So CFM testing is fundamentally just blowing air down a tube. So you've got a fan, you've got a tube. The tube is the same diameter as the fan, meaning that there's no room for the air to expand, or very little room for the air to expand. So that means all the air has a tendency to travel down the tube. Now, a fan that does spew air off to the sides as opposed to concentrated airflow will tend to have larger boundary layers. That's a slow-moving section of air that is close to the walls, and it's just because the air is bouncing off the walls, and rather than being directed down the tube. So all things the same. So in theory, two fans that have the same CFM value, but one with a concentrated airflow and one without, they would have different CFM values if you measured it down the tube at some distance. And so you could end up with the fans in the correct order, meaning best to worst, as my case simulation test, but you would get there for kind of the wrong reasons. So by that I mean is you're not getting the whole picture. So that case simulation test is taking a look at 4 key locations. I want to add more in the future, but that's beside the point because it's not allowing the air to expand out and really drop in airspeed. So you're not really seeing how functionally good a fan is. But A CFM test is good for certain things. So if you want to scientifically measure how good a fan is in different types of pressure scenarios, it is a perfectly valid test. There's nothing wrong with testing a fan doing that way. But only looking at a CFM value, again, the volumetric flow rate, as the only determining factor as to whether a fan is good or bad in a case airflow situation is fundamentally incorrect, and you're not getting the whole picture. So any channel that is talking about it that way doesn't understand their stuff. I'm an actual aerospace engineer. This is an area specialty for me. It's my area of background in college. So, I mean, yeah. So now I did do the CFM test, and we got RPM versus CFM, and we see that the P12 Slim is underperforming compared to the other fans. In terms of noise performance, it's also underperforming. So this is in stark contrast to what we saw in the test through the CPU air cooler. In terms of positioning, noise normalized, it's right towards the bottom. Here's the A12X15. It's at least outperforming that one. You'll notice that, it's down here at the bottom, so it didn't really matter much, but, that's what it is. And the CFM Slim is even lower. But as we crank things up to 100% PW fan signaling, here's the A12X15, and here's the CFM Slim. Vastly, not quite vastly, maybe just pretty substantially outperforming the P12 Slim in this particular test. And in terms of noise performance, once again, we do see it's not quite a flat line, but it's not as steep a line as other ones. So it's just not quite hitting the same kind of performance curve as we saw in other tests. Compared to the A12X15, I almost said 25, you can see that the 15 is much more of an airflow-oriented fan because the gaps are huge, while the P12 Slim has a very little gap between it, and they almost overlap each other. Wow, these blades are very thin. Sorry, I got distracted there. The A12X15, they're very stiff, so that does affect harmonics depending on what kind of frequency or PWM fan signal. You may find that they just vibrate a little bit and create some resonant type noises, even though I didn't find them to be significant in testing. Just because I didn't find it in testing doesn't mean that there isn't a PWM fan signal, because I only tested it every 10 with my current testing methodology, that it wouldn't be at one of the signals. So somewhere in between the current testing that I did. And last up is value proposition. This is literally performance per dollar. The P12 Slim is a $10 fan, as I could find it as its base price on Amazon. So that's what we're going with. Note that value proposition does change with the whatever the current price is of the fan. I'm basing mine off of the US dollar, so depending on where you live, the fans may shift around a little bit. So do be aware of that. So this is the value proposition is best that I can generate for you. If you're on an ultra tight budget, I recommend that you get the best in value proposition that you can afford, because you're probably going to be filling out your case with fans. If you've got a little bit of extra money and wiggle room, that's when you compare it to earlier graphs to determine which fans hit the performance criteria you care about the most. And by that I refer to an extra, so that's noise performance, airspeed performance, or a different extra, which is visual appearance, which includes RGB, or just like the blade design for how you want the overall aesthetic to look. That's an extra that is up to you to determine which fan best meets your particular set of needs. So the P12 Slim is doing really well actually in value proposition, and actually in value at the 6-inch mark compared to the other Slim fans. So the CFM Slim is up there, and the P12X15 is down there. So really it is the best value proposition, which is really interesting. And at 100% PWM fan signaling, it maintains its position there. The CFM Slim gains a lot of traction there. The X15, on the other hand, is still towards the bottom of the pack. So the X Slim really looks like the best fan to go to if you need that sort of slim fan in your computer case. In terms of its position compared to other fans around, it's still doing pretty well. At the 11-inch mark, we're not expecting much from it because we saw that it's dropped off pretty steeply, but because of its relatively cheap price, it is actually performing really quite well compared to the other fans around it in terms of the value. But once again, its actual performance was a bit on the low side, so I'd probably get something else. In terms of the CFM value proposition, it's actually still doing pretty okay, even though we saw that its performance really wasn't that good. It just is a cheap enough fan that it comes up high in the graphs. And of course, the CPU air cooler, it's doing pretty okay as well. It's right up there towards the top, so it's definitely a great value fan if you need that slimline performance. So this leads me to a general conclusion for this fan. It does really quite well in the CPU air cooler or for a short throw distance in a CPU or in a open case design. It's unnecessary if you want to put this into like any sort of regular tower, so I would just get something else. If you'd like to support this channel directly, other than hitting that subscribe button, which does go a long way, become a YouTube member, or you can join me on Patreon. Every penny earned or received from that goes directly into this endeavor for fan testing. I want to get a better dedicated microphone for noise testing, improve my test chamber, make a better anemometer, or buy a better anemometer, a little test system, a little test chamber for blocking out some excess noise, all the kind of fun jazz. But that's kind of future plans. And at the end of every video, I do like to show off my raw data. This data does belong to me. However, if you would like to use it for your own particular use, i.e. putting into Excel to make your own graphs and tables to compare fans so that you don't need to reference my videos every single time, you are more than welcome to do so. However, if you're going to use any sort of video, publication, written, or journal, I do ask that you reference me and my channel, or at least ask my permission, because it takes a lot of hard work to generate this data. For my level of testing right now, it takes around 1.5 to 2 hours per fan to test. As the channel grows into the future and add more different testing, it will take longer. You got suggestions for more fans for me to take a look at, please leave in the comment sections down below. If you got constructive criticism for me on way I can make these videos more enjoyable to watch, please leave that down below as well, because I'm always trying to improve them and make them more enjoyable. Anyways, thank you very much for watching my video here on Computer Tech and More, and have a great day.